Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Coming up, China's #1 central document pushes for grain security and agri-tech innovation. Trump unveils $12 billion critical minerals stockpile. Analysis show German investment in China reached a 4-year high in the first 11 months of last year. And the French authorities have raided the ex-offices in Paris and summoned Elon Musk in cybercrime probe. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. China has unveiled its #1 central document for 2026, outlining plans for advancing agricultural modernization and rural revitalization. Chinese authorities say the focus of this year's work related to agriculture, rural areas, and farmers include 4 key missions and 2 key supporting measures. The 4 missions include enhancing the production, capacity, quality, and efficiency of the agricultural sector, providing targeted and regular assistance, promoting stable increases in farmers' income, and advancing the development of beautiful and harmonious countryside. The 2 key supporting measures include strengthening institutional innovation and strengthening the CPC's leadership in these works. The document has set an annual target of keeping grain output at about 700 million tons, stressing that food security remains the top priority. So for more, joining us now on the line is Professor Liu Baochen from the University of International Business and Economics. So thank you very much for joining us today, Professor Liu Baochen. First of all, why do you think this year's document is placing particular emphasis on boosting agricultural production capacity and efficiency?
I think the government has taken into consideration of 2 dimensions in making such sort of policy direction. One is China has really limited arable land because with less than 1/10 of the world arable land and providing the food for almost 1/5 of the world population is a daunting task ahead. So that's the reality that China has to face. The other is that the global volatility has been going on in the food supply, in the value chain, and also in the vulnerability of certain areas in which China has the collaborative relationship. And so, these are the dimensions that drive for such a sort of shift. In addition to that, by boosting efficiency, you can really derive more of the yields from the same factors of contribution through innovation. So therefore, it shifts that it really signals a shift from a short-term boost now to a long-term food security, where more of the not only productivity, but also in the variety, in the quality of the agricultural produce, it can be there to target towards more sustainable development for not only the Chinese agricultural industry, but also how they can really harness the integration between the rural life, rural productivity versus industrial productivity, and also with the urban life.
The document calls for accelerating the breeding of breakthrough crop varieties, expanding applications of drones, the Internet of Things, and robotics, and ensuring that agricultural technologies reach more villages. What do you make of the role played by technology in terms of raising China's agricultural output, especially grain output? And by the way, for example, official data of China shows that in 2025, the contribution rate of agricultural science and technology progress in China surpassed 64%. What does this particular rate mean, realistically speaking, and how would you comment on this rate?
Technology has always been the primary driver for agricultural industrial output, so there's no doubt about that. The breakthrough seed varieties that's there to improve the yield stability, while what you mentioned, drones, Internet of Things, smart farming technologies and equipments can enable precision farming. They are there on one side to reduce the waste and also to reduce the labor intensity. And on the other, it can be more scientific in providing the inputs from fertilizer to pesticides to irrigation system and also up to the harvesting. And what is more important is that it also helps the farmers to deploy more of their technologies with their renewed skill sets to bargain with the different sections of the supply chain so that they can really be able to get better income. So over the years, we noticed that the e-commerce that farmers have been doing has been very successful in cutting through many of those intermediary channels, which absorbs their profit. So that's why last year, farmers have gained more on their average income than the country's total average. And now, with some of the breakthroughs in the technology, there are several reasons. One is that there are a lot of lower thresholds in boosting the agricultural technology. So that's why there has been such sort of a success in the R&D. And the other is that the government has really focused on the rural revitalization. So in answer to the call and also with the government support, either financially or the policy-wise, so the more of the scientists are really shifting their attention to build the more of the innovation programs for agricultural produces. And the technologies can also be widely applicated to deal with the practical issues like weather forecasting, like the big machine operation for scale and for scope. And many of those e-commerce platforms are also in place to boost the efficiency in dealing with the entire supply chain. So that's really an indication of the structural transformation towards a modern technology-led agricultural industries.
Modern technology-led agricultural industries. So, with that in mind, in what ways do you think agricultural modernization might be able to enhance the modernization of actual rural life, namely the improvement of farmers' livelihoods, which we know represents another, pillar for this year's number one central document?
Well, modernization through multiple means can first bring about higher yields. So that's the better harvest, and also that's there to give a higher level of predictability over the crop, over precision farming, and that can also help them to stretch the value chain from which they can benefit more. Because, for example, it's not only the raw materials they are there to provide, but rather to engage more along the value chain in terms of the processing, in terms of logistics, in terms of the agri-service, in terms of the rural tourism, and also branding for certain specialities. So that can really create a diverse channel for their income source. And equally important, modernization can really reduce the income volatility by improving the irrigation system, by dealing with the climate response, building market access, and information transparency. So with the increased income, the farmers can really benefit, by improving their living conditions, by spending more of their income for Medicare, for insurance, and also to improve their travel conditions, like there's more e-vehicles that are being placed, and also they are able to introduce more of the green transformation campaign to benefit their individual life, for example, by installing more of the solar panels, by generating the power through the windmills. So that can really holistically improve the livelihood of the local people.
We know another highlight in this year's document is the call for implementing targeted and regular assistance to the rural areas. China achieved a decisive success in terms of poverty alleviation back in 2020, and that particular achievement has been further, consolidated through a 5-year transition period over the past 5 years. Why do you think targeted and regular assistance to rural areas is still needed?
Well, generally speaking, shared prosperity is the primary mission of the Chinese government. So poverty alleviation has stricken a tremendous success by eliminating absolute poverty, but it did not really remove structural vulnerability, which is also evolving along this entire process. So many of the rural areas remain exposed to certain risks, such as natural disaster, market fluctuation, and some areas also experience health shocks. And what is also dragging the feet would be the education level and also the weak local industries. So to help the local villages and local communities to be able to be aware of the vulnerabilities by providing knowledge, and also to provide more of the access for healthcare, for insurance, and also for market, and eventually to channel the capital and equipments and technology into the local area, can further build the buffer against the possible slipping into poverty. And also there can be identified and precise way to achieve that, given all the digital technologies. So that's, I think, the government resolve to shift from a campaign-style poverty relief now to a long-term governance to address the sustainability of the shared prosperity among all localities.
Thank you very much for joining us. Professor Liu Baochen joining us from the University of International Business and Economics. Coming up, President Donald Trump unveils $12 billion critical minerals stockpile. This is World Today. Stay tuned.
Sleek, plush, futuristic. Hidden door handles once symbolized the EV era. Now they're being flagged as safety risks. China is set to ban them, becoming the first country in the world to take such a step. What triggered the move? How will it affect automakers? Will the impact stop at car design or ripple into global standards? We'll break it all down on this week's Chat Lounge. Tune in wherever you get your podcasts and on CGTN Radio.
You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. The Trump administration has announced a plan to establish a strategic minerals reserve with an aim to protect U.S. manufacturers from supply chain shocks. The plan will pool some $2 billion in private capital with a $10 billion loan from the U.S. Export and Import Bank. The stockpile would support industries ranging from automobiles to electronics and aerospace. And in response to Washington's policy move, China's foreign ministry says that Beijing's position on maintaining the stability and security of global critical mineral supply chains remains to be consistent, calling on all parties to play a constructive role. So joining us now on the line is Ina Tangen, Senior Fellow with the Center for International Governance Innovation, a Canadian think tank. Thank you very much for joining us, Ina.
Thank you, Ding.
So first of all, Money-wise, do you think 12 billion US dollars, including the loans and those private capital, will be enough in terms of building such a strategic, rare earth stockpile?
Well, Ding, the problem here isn't stockpiling rare earth, it's the processing of them. So, you can process all the wheat in the world. I mean, you can store all the wheat in the world, but unless you grind it up and make it usable, it's completely useless. So the plan is odd at best. All that I can figure is that Donald Trump is trying something to extract, because he's extending this to other countries. And the idea, he likes to get other countries to give money to the U.S. because then he can claim that, he's bringing money in to the American people. But it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I mean, and even the amount is more than an entire year's worth of rare earths. For instance, in 2024, which was about two-thirds to three-quarters of that amount.
Okay. So President Donald Trump has actually compared his particular plan here for the stockpile to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve that was created in the 1970s when an Arab oil embargo led to a shortage of gas. Is that a fair comparison?
No, not really. Yes, you have two elements in there, but if you stockpile the oil, you can actually use it. In this particular case, stockpiling all the rare earths in the world isn't going to allow you to use them. He's not identified that the United States, if it wants to do this, will have to put an enormous amount of money, probably at least $6 to $8 billion, in order to try to catch up with China as it is today. The current estimates is that it would be much more expensive. They could produce them. It would take 5 years to just answer the needs that they have for the military side, and then it would take 10 to 15 years to get it to a point where it could satisfy the industrial side. Now, China has not been threatening anything that is a legitimate use, but they're obviously not going to allow the U.S. to use rare earths to build weapons that are used to threaten or actually harm China. That wouldn't make any sense to anybody. So Donald Trump, once again, is causing a diversion, trying to make it look like he's doing something when, in fact, there's not much he can do.
Okay. So looking ahead, what could be the possible obstacles for Trump's plan here?
Well, as I said, all the rare earths in the world isn't going to make a rare earth magnet. That's a process issue, and there's no easy answer to that. As I said, minimum of 5 years. And remember, during that 5 years, China is not standing still. You go back to the very beginning. The reason that China started developing rare earths is because there was a market. Why was there a market? Because both Europe and America said, this is a environmentally nasty business. We don't want to do it. We'll outsource it to anybody else who's willing. China was willing, and they have worked the process. Now it is much less environmentally damaging, and they are at the apex, not only in terms of the technology they use, but in terms of the amounts. 98% of rare earth niobium magnets are produced in China. You're not going to break that current situation by stockpiling rare earths somewhere in the United States. It has to be about processing. And as you can see, he isn't paying much attention to that.
So it seems the Trump administration is looking to make this planned stockpile a U.S.-led multinational, critical minerals club. And according to Donald Trump's Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, about 30 countries want to join. Is this a sign that when it comes to critical minerals and rare earth, the Trump administration is putting away its America First mentality?
No, not at all. Remember that Donald Trump also claimed that India is going to spend $500 billion buying U.S. energy and weapons over the next year or so. There's a lot of claims that come out of the White House. Very few of them turn out to be entirely correct. Mostly they're exaggerations. There might be countries who are saying, well, we don't want to be sole sourced with China, but they are far from joining his little club, kind of like his peace effort. He says everyone wants to join, but he hasn't had as many takers as he would wish.
Mm. Now, critical minerals have really become a key bargaining chip in this ongoing either trade negotiations or geopolitical rivalry, let's put it this way, between Washington and Beijing. But I know let's clarify here, on the part of China or on the part of the Chinese government, is there such a thing as rare earth hegemony? Is China abusing its dominance in terms of critical mineral supply chains?
Well, I would say mostly no, but there have been instances. In 2010, when there was a issue with the Diaoyu Islands, Senkaku Islands, whoever you want to call it, with Japan, China did not declare a moratorium on rare earth exports, but rare earth exports were not reaching Japan, and they finally agreed to stop making these silly claims about these islands. But this is a situation where China has a real security interest in making sure that countries do not use resources they provide to build weapons to threaten or actually use against China. I mean, that only makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, why would I give you ammunition when you say you want to shoot me? So this is a tricky area. As I said, China has not threatened any legitimate use of rare earths, other than in a very, very encapsulated situation with Japan, where they were, in essence, crossing a red line and perhaps starting a conflict.
Okay. Now, it seems the logic of some people is that, okay, we can stop selling advanced AI chips to China, but China cannot stop selling us critical minerals.
Well, this is the best way to colonial mentality. We tell you what you can and cannot do, but that does not apply to us. We can do whatever we want. And we see this quite clearly, both in the US and to a certain degree sometimes with Europe. It's getting better now as people realize that the world is interconnected, that you cannot, simply say, I'm going to stop selling these to you and you can't do anything about it. If I came up and started punching you in the face and say, hey, don't do anything about it, just let me keep punching you, you'd be looking at me like I'm crazy. I have to defend myself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like what Bessent is saying right now. He's saying to Europe, don't react. Yes, we're kicking you. Yes, that's, but don't react. You will just make us more angry. This kind of colonial attitude that somehow you have to take abuse from me simply because I'm more powerful than you, that's going out of style.
Okay. So finally, and very briefly, Ina, over the long term, should China worry about losing its dominance in this particular area?
No, because China is the low-cost producer. It accepts a lower return on total equity. And quite frankly, it continues to innovate and stay ahead of the competition.
Your point's well taken, but thank you very much for joining us. Ina Tangen, Senior Fellow with the Center for International Governance Innovation, a Canadian think tank. More to come. Analysis are showing that German investment in China reached a 4-year high in the first 11 months of last year, and the French authorities have raided the ex-offices in Paris and summoned Elon Musk in cybercrime investigation. You are listening to World Today. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on our previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. We'll be back after a short break. You're back with World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. China's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office has criticized Panama's top courts for ignoring facts, breaching trust, and seriously damaging the legitimate interests of Hong Kong enterprises. The statement came days after the court annulled a contract for Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison to operate two ports on the Panama Canal. The statement says China has sufficient means and tools and capability to defend a fair and just international economic order. Last Friday, China's foreign ministry also vowed to take all necessary measures to safeguard the legitimate interests of Chinese companies. U.S. President Donald Trump has been threatening to seize control of the Panama Canal, falsely claiming that this waterway is under Chinese control. So joining us now on the line is Dr. Jiang Shixue, distinguished professor from the College of International Relations, Sichuan International Studies University. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Jiang.
Yes, thank you.
So, does China have a point when China's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office accuses Panama's Supreme Court of ignoring facts and breaching trust? What kind of facts should we keep in mind?
The so-called Supreme Court ruling of Panama is apparently against international business law. So any country can condemn this kind of ruling. And for China, as you know, Hong Kong is part of China. So China has the right to criticize or even condemn this kind of ruling by the Supreme Court of Panama.
Now, CK Hutchison, this Hong Kong-based company, is nowadays resorting to international arbitration proceedings in this particular case. Do you think this move is going to make any difference in terms of how this company will be treated regarding the Panama Canal ports?
Now, we are in the age of globalization. We are now in the age of rule of law. So when there is a dispute over what kind of any kind of a business between the countries, I think the best way is to ask for help by the so-called international business law. So in this case, I think the only way out for the Hong Kong company and the mainland Chinese government is to go to the court, the so-called International Arbitration Court. I believe that this kind of arbitration will say who is right, who is not right.
Okay. So, Professor Jiang, as somebody who has been closely following the situation, we know this particular case or this issue has been brewing since President Donald Trump returned to the White House for his second term in office. So looking at the latest judgment by Panama's top court, do you think this result was surprising to you?
For me, I don't think it is a big surprise, but I'm still surprised that Panama has taken sides of this kind of competition between China and the U.S. Well, the U.S. is not happy about China over its relationship with Latin America over the past 1 or 2 decades, and the U.S. has been trying its best to drive a wedge between China and Latin America. A few months ago, with the pressure from the U.S., Panama said it wanted to withdraw from the Belt Road. Yeah. And now Panama, and also once again, under the pressure of the U.S., has ruled out this kind of quite a strange ruling against the Hong Kong company. But while as I pointed out just now, that I think the Hong Kong company and as well as mainland China, the government of the People's Republic of China will do something to protect the interests of the Chinese companies.
Of course, one thing we have to mention, objectively speaking, is that Washington has a track record. Washington has a history of invading Panama in history back in 1989, for example. So when Panama yields to Washington's pressure by kicking this Hong Kong-based company out of the Panama Canal, what kind of prices, economically or politically, do you think Panama might have to pay over the long term?
Yes, I'm sorry to say that the memory of Panama is so terrible. Okay, in the year 1989, the U.S. sent troops to Panama to capture its leader, and now Panama is just following the order of the U.S. So it is quite strange for me to believe that people in Panama have so terrible memory. And well, I would say that the U.S. I don't believe that the U.S. will succeed this time, although that kind of ruling will cause trouble for the Hong Kong company. And hopefully that the Hong Kong company will get rid of this kind of difficult crisis in the near future. And with the help of the international community, I believe that justice will prevail.
So in a bigger picture sense, Professor Jiang, do you think this particular case we're talking about here is a sign that in the foreseeable future, we're going to see more and more conflicts or conflicts of interests between the United States and China in Latin America? Why or why not?
Well, I would say you're right. And I think starting from now, Chinese companies, Chinese relationship with Latin America in the business sector in terms of trade and investment will face more harsh difficulties from the so-called American pressure. But I want to point out that most of the countries in Latin America will not take sides. Okay. Because China's cooperation with these countries in Latin America has produced very good results for the economy of Latin America. And even for Panama, the Hong Kong company has made lots of investment over the past several years. Yeah. And this Hong Kong company has created lots of employment opportunities. So as a matter of fact, Panama has benefited greatly from this Hong Kong company's business operation. And it is reported that Panama will ask the Danish company Musk to take over this operation, but I'm sure that the operation in the canal will be negatively affected. So as the Chinese government has said, so we hope that the Panama will correct its mistake. Otherwise, we can expect that China will take some actions, tit for tat.
Okay. So lastly and briefly, Professor, at a time when Washington under President Donald Trump appears to be moving to strengthen its hegemonic power and a sphere of influence in Latin America, should China recalibrate its policy, its approach to that region?
Yes, you're right. I think in the near future, China, first of all, will do a better feasibility study over the investment environment in the host country in Latin America. The political environment is not so good in the past several years, particularly under the pressure of the American the so-called hegemony, because the U.S. wants to kick China out of its Western Hemisphere. And secondly, I would suggest that Chinese companies must protect its economic interests with the protection of the international business law. Okay, if there's no business international law, well, no one can do business at all. So let's hope that Latin America will do something to protect its interests as well as the Chinese interests. And we have seen that cooperation between China and Latin America is based on win-win results, and this will come true in a better way in the near future, I believe.
Thank you very much for joining us. Professor Jiang Shixue joining us from Sichuan International Studies University. You're listening to World Today. We'll be back. You're back with World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. New analysis show that investment in China by German companies hit a 4-year high through the first 11 months of 2025. According to the IW German Economic Institute, the investment climbed to more than 7 billion euros between January and November of last year, up by 55% from the 4.5 billion euros in the previous year. Major players including BASF and Bosch are expanding production, localizing R&D, and investing in cutting-edge areas from smart mobility to advanced materials. So for more, my colleague Zhao Yang earlier spoke with Dr. Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow with the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation.
So, Dr. Zhou Mi, thank you very much for joining us. German investment in China hit a 4-year high in 2025. So, what do you think is really driving this investment surge?
I think that there may be two kinds of forces. The first one is the push forces coming from Europe itself. We are seeing that Europe is suffering from the higher inflation, and the cost of doing businesses is getting higher and higher. So the companies who are going to have a sustainable development in Germany, they cannot just stay there. They want to do more in the competition with other countries and the companies. So they found that the investment in China is so attractive to support their expansion. And the pull forces come from the China's investment climate. We can say that Chinese investment climate is getting better, and it's very sustainable and predictable. So there are so many innovation forces, which is really important to supporting the Germany companies. We know that in China and Germany, both countries are really good at manufacturing. So the cooperation are already there for so many years. So I think that this development is based on their understanding about each other, and I believe that is also complementary and beneficiary for both sides.
And how do the industrial structures of Germany and China complement each other? And why is this important for bilateral investment?
Yes, as I said, that the structure of the economy is a little bit alike in the past, because China and Germany are really manufacturing dominating countries. So we have so many things to understand each other, and about the standards, about the criteria, about the ways of doing businesses. Well, in recent years, I would say that there are more new elements in China. We're introducing innovation abilities like artificial intelligence or very wide applications of the using of the AI. And another area is that in China, many cities are trying to have a better development about the service sectors, and service sectors is embedded with manufacturing, which is empower factor to make the manufacturing more efficient and more intelligent. I think that is really what the Germany company want to do. They are not just trying to do something repeatedly. They want to do more innovatively to address the demand of the market in the separate or segment of the market, and trying to have a better performance in the certain areas.
And how are German companies aligning with China's push for industrial modernization, digitalization, and green technologies? Could you give us some examples?
I would say that they are really attracted by China's ideas of doing that. It's not just for 1 year, but for like the 5-year plans, or even to the 2035. So as one example, you can find that Volkswagen, as a manufacturing of the automobiles, they are cooperating with their partner in China to introduce more green energies. And some of these companies in Germany who are doing the businesses with the robots, they are also coping with Chinese companies on how can make the robots more affordable to the families and be better fitted for the usage in the manufacturing and the factories. So I mean, that is not just from the abilities and technology. It's also about the intellectual property cooperation, and also about how can they just try to identify the potential markets in the different areas. So the cooperation is not only about the producing the products; they are really are depending on the markets. So they are really benefited from the China's cooperation with the Belt and Road countries, and it's a real vast potential market for Germany companies to do cooperation with Chinese companies.
And of course, the investment surge is about confidence in China. Is this also a response to rising protectionism elsewhere, particularly in the United States?
Definitely. I would say that is the main pressure many countries are suffering. It's not just about, some of the ideas in the bilateral levels, like US has put so many requirements on EU exports, and they require EU to import more things from United States. It is really about the attitudes towards the governance, towards globalization. So I think that there are so many new changes are happening in the WTO reform regime, and the US is trying to push the governance of the trade and investment in its own way, the so-called reciprocal way. But actually, it is really are getting a bigger share of the market. So I think that many Germany companies want to survive in such kind of circumstances, but they are not just trying to be able to enter the US market as before. So they are really want to do more to change their ways of doing businesses. Cooperation is one of the choices and the tactics that they are used.
And what makes China so hard to replace in the global supply chains? In sectors like autos, chemicals, and semiconductors, can European firms realistically rebuild the supply chains without China?
I don't think it will be realistic or what the European companies really want to have to be not engaging with Chinese companies. The China's advantage is coming from its systematic ways of doing manufacturing. It's not just started from certain companies or certain sectors. It is widespread almost across different manufacturings, and the abilities of the capacities of producing the products are really resilient in the stable supply chains network. So European companies are really want to do more businesses with China because it's more innovative and the cost is not that high, and they will also benefit from the new ideas and the new applications in different ways. So the cooperation are really beneficiary for both sides, and I believe that is the reasons why the Germany companies can create, its brand based on the sustainable supply and also very high quality.
And we are seeing visit by leaders from Finland, the UK, and growing trade talks recently. So is Europe recalibrating its policy towards China? What signal do they send? And what's the outlook of China-Europe economic ties in the year ahead?
It is a little bit more complicated when we're looking at the relation between China and Europe because it's have different levels, like from the different states, like the countries you have mentioned, they are really want to be very active in participating and cooperating with China. But EU as a mechanism is still a little bit more not acting so quickly because some of these factors coming from the outside, like the US, are pressuring them to do that. But I would say that the market is more decisive in this regard comparing with the decision of the government. So I believe that in the coming years, there will be more kind of communication and more companies or countries will be inspired or encouraged by the good examples that we have already established, like the China UK companies are doing more on the trade in services. China's Finland companies are doing more on the new energy or other innovative areas. So these good examples are really pushing or encouraging more companies to be engaged with Chinese companies.
Dr. Zhou Mi was the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, talking with my colleague Zhao Yang. You are listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. French prosecutors have required Elon Musk to appear for questioning as part of an ongoing investigation into alleged illegal content on the social media platform X. The move follows a search of X's offices in the city of Paris on Tuesday. Prosecutors say that the investigation is examining suspected criminal offenses linked to the platform's operations. Elon Musk is calling this move as a political attack. For more, my colleague Xu Yawen spoke with Harvey Zolden, Senior Fellow with the Center for China and Globalization.
Harvey, French authorities have raided X offices in Paris and summoned Elon Musk over allegations that include sexual deepfakes to Holocaust denial. From your view, how big a move is this? Is France mainly targeting X and Elon Musk here, or is it sending a broader message to big tech operating in the EU?
I would say, Yavin, it's both of those things. So many issues are never so simple. And so for this one, it is a criminal investigation, which is very important to note because it's not a civil allegation. The officers of the company could go to jail if they're convicted. So it's a serious matter. On the other hand, I do think it sends a broader message to the big tech companies. The problem is you have to look at the background of the situation today. And the situation is that the alliance between France and the US, between the EU and US, has been basically shredded by Donald Trump's policies. And because of that, the knives are coming out on both sides, I have to say. And here, there is a concern, but it's also a political concern that goes beyond this issue of the balance of freedom of speech and expression and so on. France will have an election quite soon. And because President Macron's party is slated to lose, you have this in the background, and you have the party of Musk's friend, Marine Le Pen, scheduled or predicted by polls to win in a landslide. So that's the big backdrop that you have to consider in analyzing this issue.
Well, what really stands out here is that prosecutors are not just looking at illegal content, but at whether the platform itself may be complicit. In legal terms, how hard is it to prove a social media company crossed that line? And how does this go beyond the usual enforcement under EU's Digital Services Act?
It's very difficult to prove, but it must be tried because these are important issues. And so they'll be fully investigated and litigated. So you really have a balance here between freedom of speech on one hand, regulation on the other, which involves protection of minors, of Holocaust survivors, of denial of certain things that happened in World War II. And so this is not going to be easy, but I believe that it's going to be a landmark case that is going to go beyond France and beyond the EU. And it also affects the political debate in the United States, because in the United States, we have what's called Section 230 of the Communications Act, which basically absolves the tech companies of any liability for what is posted, aired, discussed on their platforms. And Europe is now facing some of the same issues.
Well, Harvey, Elon Musk has called the investigation here I quote, political attack, and says it targets free speech. From a European regulatory perspective, how do authorities defend moves like this while still saying they're protecting freedom of expression? And where does the balance sit under EU law?
That's a very complicated question. But basically, it's the difference between the right to speak and where you draw the red lines to prevent illegal speech and speech which is inflammatory, false, misleading, deceptive. And so it's going to be a very interesting case in France and in the EU. So from a European regulatory perspective, authorities very much tilt in favor of freedom of speech. And that's why I think France is pushing, especially if you look at the political background of this, the difficulties between the US, EU, and France itself.
The case also puts a spotlight on X AI chatbot, Grok, especially when it comes to sexual deepfakes. So with generative AI moving so fast nowadays, do existing laws actually go far enough? And when things go wrong, who should be held responsible? Do you think that would be the AI developer, the platform, or both?
Oh, well, as we used to say a long time ago, this is the $64,000 question. But really, it's because of the fact that it is complicated, that there needs to be a very serious legislative investigation of these kinds of laws, not only in France or the EU or US. These are, I would say, existential issues politically in all the different countries. And so I believe that Europe, because it does tilt towards regulation and towards protection of minority rights and so on, and because the EU has already enacted legislation which has angered American tech companies, this is just the latest continuation in the battle.
And lastly, Harvey, looking beyond this case, France and the EU, they're clearly tightening enforcement, while the US warns this could turn to political censorship of American tech companies. Do you see this deepening the divide between Europe and America on tech regulation? And could this case maybe set a precedent for tougher criminal enforcement against global social media platforms?
Yeah, I think it is larger than the case itself. And I do think that it's also a given that in the past, when high tech wasn't as tech, that the law can't keep up with technological developments. And that's why we're having this problem. We've had many problems in the past. I believe that these questions need to have a global inquiry, and that many countries need to have input on what is capable of being done in AI and what's capable of regulating it. In other words, AI poses existential risks to humanity. And we really need to get ahead of this, but we're really far behind. In America, the tech bros, they say, well, don't cut us off. Let us innovate. If there's any problems, well, we'll fix them after the fact. The problem is some of these problems are so great that you can't fix them after the fact because they're existential. They threaten our way of life. They threaten our political systems and things like that.
Well, that was Harvey Zolden, Senior Fellow with the Center for China and Globalization, talking with my colleague Xu Yawen. That's all the time for this edition of World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.